Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent hours at the local shooting range with her grandfather, a former Marine. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharp, and her mind focused like a laser beam. When she turned 18, Sarah made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She walked into the Army recruitment office on Main Street, her ponytail swinging behind her, and signed up for infantry training. The recruiter, Sergeant Johnson, looked at her twice before processing her paperwork. "You sure about this, miss?" he asked, glancing at her petite frame. "Infantry is tough work. Maybe you'd prefer administration or medical?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard this question 100 times before. "I'm sure, Sergeant. I want to be where the action is." Basic training at Fort Benning was everything she expected and more. The drill sergeant screamed at her. The physical demands pushed her body to its limits, and the other recruits looked at her like she was an alien from another planet. But Sarah had something most of them didn't have: an unbreakable will and a natural talent for warfare that surprised even herself. During weapons training, she consistently outshot men twice her size. In tactical exercises, she moved through the battlefield like a ghost, appearing where enemies least expected her. Her instructors began to take notice, though not all of their attention was positive. "Martinez moves wrong," complained Drill Sergeant Hayes during one evening debrief. "She's too quiet, too calculating. Infantry needs aggression, not this sneaky nonsense." But Captain Williams, who had been watching Sarah's progress closely, disagreed. He saw something in her that others missed: a rare combination of patience, precision, and deadly instincts that couldn't be taught. As graduation approached, Sarah faced her biggest challenge yet. The final exercise would determine her placement after basic training. She knew that one mistake could land her in a support role instead of the combat position she desperately wanted. The pressure was enormous, but Sarah had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The night before the exercise, she cleaned her rifle one more time and wrote a letter to her grandfather. In it, she promised him that she would make him proud, no matter what anyone else thought about her unconventional approach to soldiering. The final exercise began at dawn with a mission briefing that made Sarah's heart race. Her unit would infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, and eliminate high-value targets without being detected. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been dreaming about. As the team moved through the dense forest training ground, Sarah noticed how the other soldiers moved. They crashed through underbrush like elephants, their boots heavy on fallen leaves, their breathing loud in the morning air. She shook her head and adjusted her approach, flowing between trees like water, each step calculated and silent. "Martinez, pick up the pace," barked Sergeant Hayes over the radio. "You're falling behind." But Sarah wasn't falling behind. She was taking a different route, one that would position her perfectly for the mission ahead. While her teammates focused on speed, she focused on positioning and stealth. It was a gamble that could either prove her worth or end her infantry dreams. The first objective was a mock enemy camp, where they needed to gather intelligence without being spotted. Sarah's teammates charged forward in formation, but she held back, studying the layout and guard patterns. When she finally moved, it was with the grace of a cat stalking its prey. She slipped past 3 guards, photographed crucial documents, and was back at the rally point before her teammates had even reached the camp perimeter. The exercise controllers were amazed, but Sergeant Hayes was furious. "That's not how we do things in the real army, Martinez," he shouted. "Infantry is about teamwork, not showing off." Sarah remained silent, but inside she felt frustrated. She wasn't showing off, she was being effective. There was a difference, and she wished more people could see it. The second objective proved even more challenging. They had to eliminate a target in a heavily guarded compound while avoiding civilian casualties. As her team planned a frontal assault, Sarah studied the building from every angle, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. "I can get closer," she whispered to the team leader. "Give me 10 minutes, negative, Martinez. We go in together or not at all." But as the assault began and chaos erupted around the compound, Sarah saw her chance. While bullets flew and smoke filled the air, she moved like a shadow along the building's edge, finding an unguarded entrance that her teammates had missed completely. Graduation day arrived with mixed emotions for Sarah. She had completed basic training with flying colors, but the whispers followed her everywhere. Other soldiers called her methods unorthodox, unpredictable, even dangerous. Some questioned whether she belonged in infantry at all. Captain Williams pulled her aside after the ceremony. "Martinez, you're being assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment. It's an elite unit, and they specifically requested you." Sarah's eyes widened. The Rangers were legendary, the best of the best. But she also knew it meant facing even more scrutiny and higher expectations. "Sir, why did they request me specifically?" "Because someone higher up the chain has been watching your performance. Your unconventional methods caught their attention. In special operations, thinking outside the box isn't just welcomed, it's required." 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself at Fort Benning again, but this time for Ranger School. The training was brutal, designed to break even the strongest soldiers. Sleep deprivation, constant physical stress, and psychological pressure pushed everyone to their limits. Her fellow Rangers in training were a different breed from basic training recruits. These were already proven soldiers, many with combat experience. They looked at Sarah with curiosity rather than dismissal, waiting to see what she could do. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the lead instructor, made his expectations clear from day one. "I don't care if you're male, female, or Martian. In my program, you prove yourself through performance, period. Martinez, I've heard interesting things about your methods. Let's see if they work under real pressure." The first major test came during a night infiltration exercise. Teams had to penetrate a heavily defended position and extract valuable intelligence without being detected. Failure meant starting the entire week of training over again. Sarah's team consisted of 5 other Rangers, all male, all skeptical of her quiet, methodical approach. They wanted to move fast and hard, using darkness and speed as their primary advantages. "I think we should observe the patrol patterns first," Sarah suggested during planning. "I noticed they're not random. There's a timing we can exploit." "We don't have time for observation," argued Thompson, the team's self-appointed leader. "We go in hard and fast, grab what we need, and get out." But Sarah had already been watching. During their approach march, she had been noting guard positions, timing rotations, and identifying weak points in the perimeter. Her mind worked like a computer, processing information and calculating probabilities. The infiltration mission turned into a disaster for most teams, but Sarah's quiet observations proved invaluable. While other groups triggered alarms and faced fierce resistance, she guided her team through a series of perfectly timed movements that exploited every gap in the enemy's defenses. "There," she whispered, pointing to a guard tower. "He checks his watch every 12 minutes, then turns to scan the opposite direction for 30 seconds. That's our window." Her teammates began to understand that Sarah's careful, methodical approach wasn't weakness. It was a different kind of strength. By the time they reached the objective, they had encountered zero resistance and maintained complete stealth. But extracting the intelligence proved more challenging. The documents were locked in a building with guards at every entrance. Thompson wanted to create a distraction and rush in, but Sarah had a different idea. "Give me 5 minutes," she said, studying the building layout. "I can get in through the ventilation system and unlock the side door from inside." "That's too risky," Thompson argued. "If you get caught, we all fail." Sarah was already moving. She had spotted a maintenance ladder that led to the roof, and more importantly, she had noticed that the guards never looked up. People rarely did, she had learned. It was a weakness she had exploited many times before. Within minutes, she was inside the building, moving through air ducts like she had been born for it. Her small frame, which others saw as a disadvantage, became her greatest asset in the narrow space. She could move where larger soldiers couldn't follow. The mission was a complete success, but it created more controversy. Some instructors praised her innovative thinking, while others worried that her methods were too risky and couldn't be replicated by standard infantry soldiers. "Martinez operates on a different level," Sergeant Rodriguez told his colleagues. "The question is whether we're training her or she's training us." As Ranger School progressed, Sarah's reputation grew. She became known as the soldier who could appear and disappear like smoke, who could solve problems that stumped entire teams, and who never, ever gave up. But with that reputation came increased scrutiny from those who believed there was only one right way to be a soldier. The final phase of Ranger School took place in the swamps of Florida, where students faced their ultimate test of leadership under extreme conditions. Sarah knew this would be her biggest challenge yet. Not just because of the physical demands, but because she would be expected to lead other Rangers using methods they didn't always understand or trust. 2 years after graduating Ranger School, Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez found herself deployed to Afghanistan with the 2nd Battalion. The real world of combat was everything training had prepared her for, and nothing like it at the same time. The mountains were unforgiving, the enemy was unpredictable, and every mission carried life or death consequences. Her unit was stationed at a forward operating base near the Pakistan border, where Taliban fighters moved freely through mountain passes that had been used by smugglers and warriors for centuries. Sarah's reputation had followed her to Afghanistan, but here results mattered more than methods. Major Bradley, the battalion commander, assigned her to special reconnaissance missions that required her unique skill set. While other squads engaged in direct combat operations, Sarah often worked with smaller teams, gathering intelligence and eliminating high-value targets that conventional forces couldn't reach. Martinez has a gift, he told his staff. She sees things others miss and goes places others can't. But some of the men still question her approach. The questioning came to a head during a mission briefing for Operation Silent Thunder. Intelligence had identified a Taliban commander who was coordinating attacks on supply convoys. He was hiding in a village built into the mountainside, surrounded by civilians and protected by experienced fighters. "We'll need a full company assault," suggested Captain Stevens. "Hit hard, overwhelm their defenses, and extract the target." Sarah studied the terrain photos and shook her head. "That village has women and children. A full assault would cause massive civilian casualties. There's another way." "What are you thinking, Martinez?" Major Bradley asked. "Give me a small team. 4 soldiers, maximum. We can infiltrate during the early morning prayer, when most fighters will be distracted. I've identified 3 possible routes that avoid the main defenses." Captain Stevens scoffed. "That's suicide, Martinez. You're talking about walking into a hornet's nest with a handful of soldiers. It's not sound tactical thinking." But Sarah had been studying this target for weeks. She knew the village layout, the guard rotations, and the daily routines of its inhabitants. More importantly, she had identified weaknesses that a larger force couldn't exploit. "Sometimes the smallest key opens the biggest door," she replied calmly. "Let me show you what I mean." Over the next hour, Sarah presented a detailed plan that accounted for every variable she could identify. Her approach was surgical rather than overwhelming, precise rather than powerful. It was quintessentially Sarah Martinez, careful, calculated, and completely different from standard military doctrine. Major Bradley faced a difficult decision. Sarah's plan was risky, but it offered the possibility of completing the mission without civilian casualties. A conventional assault would be safer for his soldiers, but potentially catastrophic for innocent villagers. 6 months into her new position, Sarah had proven herself capable of handling every challenge the promotion had brought. She managed a team of 3 junior designers, had successfully launched campaigns for 2 major clients, and earned recognition from industry publications for her innovative approach to visual storytelling. The professional validation felt wonderful, but the personal cost had been higher than she anticipated. Her relationship with her family had settled into a pattern of polite distance punctuated by moments of tension about her life choices. Elena still asked about her dating life during their weekly phone calls, but the questions had lost their urgency and hope. Sarah's success at work seemed to confirm her family's worst fears about her priorities, and they had gradually stopped expecting her to change course. The resignation in their voices hurt more than their previous criticism had. Sarah's social life had also shifted in ways she hadn't expected. Many of her college friends were now married with young children, and their conversations increasingly focused on family activities and domestic concerns that Sarah couldn't relate to. She found herself feeling like an outsider in groups where she had once belonged, not because anyone was unkind, but because their life experiences were diverging in fundamental ways. The loneliness was real and sometimes overwhelming, especially during evenings and weekends when her work wasn't demanding her attention. Sarah had always been comfortable with solitude, but the isolation of being the only person in her social circle, pursuing an unconventional path, felt heavier than she had anticipated. She wondered if her family's warnings about the long-term consequences of her choices were beginning to prove accurate, but then something unexpected happened during a client meeting that changed Sarah's perspective on her situation. She was presenting campaign concepts to a successful restaurant owner named Elena Vasquez, who had built a chain of authentic Mexican restaurants from a single food truck. She had started after emigrating to the United States 15 years earlier. Elena was probably in her early 40s, confident and clearly passionate about her business. During their discussion about marketing strategies, Elena mentioned that she had faced significant criticism from her community when she chose to expand her business rather than focus on her family after her husband's death. People had questioned whether a single mother should be pursuing ambitious business goals instead of prioritizing her children's need for stability and attention. Elena had ignored the criticism and built a successful enterprise that now employed over 100 people while putting her 3 children through a college. The conversation with Elena continued after their business meeting, evolving into a frank discussion about the challenges women faced when their ambitions didn't align with traditional expectations. Elena shared stories about family members who had initially disapproved of her business focus, but now celebrated her success and the financial security she had created for her children. She emphasized that criticism often reflected other people's fears and limitations rather than accurate assessments of someone's choices. Elena also introduced Sarah to a network of professional women who met monthly to discuss business challenges and support each other's career development. The group included lawyers, entrepreneurs, doctors, and executives, many of whom had faced similar family pressure about prioritizing traditional relationships over professional goals. Sarah attended her first meeting the following week and felt like she had discovered a community she hadn't known existed. The women in the group shared stories that resonated deeply with Sarah's experience. Several had been criticized by family members for being too ambitious, too independent, or too focused on career success. Others had struggled with loneliness and self-doubt while pursuing goals that set them apart from conventional expectations. But they had also found ways to build meaningful lives that honored their authentic interests and abilities. Sarah met Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, a successful pediatrician who had delayed marriage until her 30s while establishing her medical practice. Carmen had eventually married a supportive colleague and had children, but she emphasized that waiting until she was professionally established had made her a better partner and mother. Her story challenged Sarah's assumption that career focus necessarily meant sacrificing family relationships. She also connected with Lisa Chen, an architect who had chosen to remain single while building an innovative, sustainable design firm. Lisa spoke honestly about the challenges of navigating social events and family gatherings as a successful single woman, but she also described the satisfaction of creating meaningful work and the rich friendships she had developed with people who shared her values and interests. Their monthly meetings became an anchor in Sarah's life, providing perspective and support that she couldn't find elsewhere. The women in the group understood the specific challenges of pursuing ambitious goals while managing family expectations and social pressure. They offered practical advice about handling criticism, building professional networks, and maintaining confidence in the face of constant questioning about life choices. Through these new connections, Sarah also discovered opportunities she hadn't known existed. Elena Vasquez offered her freelance consulting work that could eventually develop into her own design studio. Carmen mentioned other professional women who were looking for creative services and could become clients for an independent business. Lisa invited Sarah to collaborate on a project that combined architecture and graphic design in innovative ways. For the first time since accepting her promotion, Sarah felt excited about her future rather than defensive about her choices. The criticism from her family hadn't disappeared, but it no longer felt like the only valid perspective on her life. She had found a community of women who understood her priorities and had built successful, meaningful lives without following traditional scripts. The shift in Sarah's confidence became apparent during the next family dinner, when Elena asked her usual questions about dating and marriage with the resigned tone that had become familiar. Instead of becoming defensive or apologetic, Sarah calmly explained that she was building a rich, purposeful life that brought her genuine satisfaction. She acknowledged that her path was different from what the family hoped for her, but she no longer viewed that difference as a problem requiring a solution. Her brother Carlos noticed the change in Sarah's demeanor and asked about her increased confidence and contentment. Sarah described the professional women's group and the inspiring stories she had heard about different ways to build meaningful lives. Carlos listened with genuine interest and admitted that he sometimes wondered if the traditional path everyone expected him to follow was really what he wanted for himself. The conversation revealed that Sarah wasn't the only family member questioning conventional expectations. Carlos had been considering starting his own business rather than following the stable career path everyone encouraged, but he worried about disappointing their parents. Their discussion opened up new possibilities for supporting each other's authentic choices, rather than conforming to family pressure. As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on how much her perspective had changed since meeting Elena and joining the professional women's group. The criticism from her family hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her understanding of her own worth and potential. She had discovered that her choices weren't selfish or unrealistic, just different from the path that felt right for other people. The loneliness that had troubled her for months was beginning to ease as she built connections with people who shared her values and understood her goals. Professional success felt sustainable rather than isolating when she had a community of supportive women who celebrated her achievements and offered guidance about challenges. For the first time in years, Sarah felt hopeful about her future rather than defensive about her present. 2 years later, Sarah stood in the space that would become her own design studio, sunlight streaming through large windows onto polished concrete floors. The converted warehouse loft in the Arts District felt like a physical manifestation of the dream she had been pursuing, despite constant criticism and doubt. Elena Vasquez had become her first major client, and word-of-mouth referrals from the Professional Women's Network had generated enough business to justify leaving the advertising agency and starting her independent practice. The studio opening was scheduled for the following week, and Sarah had invited everyone important to her, including her family. She wasn't sure they would attend, given their continued reservations about her unconventional choices, but she hoped they might begin to understand her path by seeing what she had built. The space itself told the story of her journey more clearly than any conversation had managed to do. Her portfolio had expanded to include restaurant branding, small business marketing, and nonprofit communications work that combined her creative skills with her desire to help organizations tell meaningful stories. The income wasn't as predictable as her agency salary had been, but it was sufficient to cover her expenses while giving her the creative freedom she had always craved. More importantly, the work felt aligned with her values and interests in ways that traditional employment had never achieved. The professional women's group had become central to both her business, success, and personal fulfillment. Carmen Rodriguez had referred several medical practices that needed updated branding, while Lisa Chen had collaborated with Sarah on projects that combined architecture and graphic design. Elena Vasquez had expanded their working relationship beyond her restaurant chain to include other businesses in her investment portfolio. These connections had created a sustainable client base, built on mutual respect and shared values. Sarah had also developed unexpected friendships within the group that enriched her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. She regularly attended cultural events with Lisa, traveled to conferences with Carmen, and had become part of a supportive community that celebrated professional achievements while understanding the personal costs of pursuing ambitious goals. The loneliness that had troubled her during her first years of career focus had been replaced by meaningful relationships with people who shared her perspective. Her romantic life had also evolved in surprising ways. Through the professional network, Sarah had met James, an environmental lawyer who worked with sustainable businesses and nonprofit organizations. Their relationship had developed slowly over months of collaboration on projects that combined his legal expertise with her design skills. James understood and respected her career ambitions because his own work required similar dedication and irregular schedules. Their partnership felt different from the relationships her family had encouraged her to pursue. Instead of competing with her professional goals, James's career complemented hers, and they supported each other's ambitions while maintaining their individual identities and interests. The relationship had grown naturally, from shared values and mutual respect rather than from pressure to meet traditional timelines or expectations. The studio opening party exceeded Sarah's expectations in every way. Her former colleagues from the advertising agency attended, along with clients, collaborators, and friends from the Professional Women's Network. The space buzzed with energy as people admired her work samples and discussed potential future projects. Sarah felt proud and confident as she moved through the crowd, explaining her vision for the studio and the types of clients she hoped to serve. Her family arrived together, looking somewhat overwhelmed by the creative energy and professional conversations happening around them. Sarah watched nervously as they examined her portfolio displays and tried to understand the scope of what she had accomplished. Elena spoke quietly with Carmen Rodriguez, who explained Sarah's role in the medical practice branding projects that had improved patient communication and community outreach. The most meaningful moment came when Miguel, her father, approached Sarah near the end of the evening with tears in his eyes. He had been talking with several of her clients about the impact her work had made on their businesses and organizations. He told Sarah that he was proud of what she had built and sorry for not understanding her goals earlier. The apology felt like a gift she hadn't expected but desperately needed. Elena, her mother, took longer to process what she was seeing and hearing. She watched Sarah interact confidently with clients and colleagues, clearly respected for her expertise and valued for her contributions. The successful, fulfilled woman Elena observed didn't match the lonely, regretful future she had predicted for her daughter. By the end of the evening, Elena admitted that Sarah seemed genuinely happy and accomplished, even if her path hadn't been the one the family had hoped for. Carlos brought several of his friends to the opening, introducing them to Sarah with obvious pride in his sister's achievements. He had recently started his own consulting business after being inspired by Sarah's courage to pursue independent work despite family pressure. Their parents had been initially concerned about his decision to leave stable employment, but Sarah's success had helped them understand that unconventional choices could lead to meaningful outcomes. The evening concluded with toasts from several clients and colleagues who spoke about Sarah's creativity, professionalism, and the positive impact her work had made on their organizations. Elena Vasquez shared the story of their first meeting and how Sarah's fresh perspective had helped rebrand her restaurants in ways that honored their cultural authenticity while appealing to broader audiences. The testimonials painted a picture of someone who had found her calling and was using her talents to benefit others. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah found herself alone in the studio with James, her family, and a few close friends from the professional women's group. The space felt peaceful and full of possibility, representing not just her professional dreams but the community and relationships she had built while pursuing them. The criticism and doubt that had accompanied her journey seemed distant and irrelevant, compared to the tangible evidence of what persistence and authenticity had created. Elena approached Sarah as the evening ended, taking her daughter's hands and looking around the beautiful space. She admitted that she had been wrong to worry so much about Sarah's choices and had failed to trust her daughter's judgment about what would bring fulfillment. The criticism had come from love and concern, but it had also reflected Elena's own fears and limitations. Rather than accurate assessments of Sarah's capabilities and potential, the conversation with her mother felt like the resolution Sarah had been seeking for years. Elena didn't suddenly embrace every aspect of Sarah's unconventional path, but she could no longer deny that her daughter had built a meaningful, successful life by following her authentic interests and abilities. The criticism hadn't stopped entirely, but it had transformed into curiosity and gradual acceptance. Over the following months, Sarah's relationship with her family continued to improve as they witnessed the sustained success of her business and the contentment she had found in her personal life. Elena began referring friends to Sarah's design services and started describing her daughter's achievements with pride rather than concern. Miguel helped with some of the practical aspects of running a business, sharing his knowledge about contracts and financial management. The studio flourished as Sarah expanded her team to include 2 junior designers and a part-time business manager. The work remained challenging and fulfilling, combining creative expression with meaningful impact on clients' success. Her relationship with James deepened into partnership that honored both their professional ambitions and personal connection. They eventually married in a small ceremony that celebrated their individual achievements alongside their commitment to supporting each other's continued growth. Looking back, Sarah realized that the criticism she had faced throughout her journey had ultimately strengthened her resolve and clarified her values. The pressure to conform to traditional expectations had forced her to examine her authentic desires and develop the courage to pursue them despite opposition. The loneliness and doubt had been real and difficult, but they had also led her to discover communities and relationships that were more aligned with her true self than the conventional connections everyone had encouraged her to prioritize. The young woman who had stood in front of her bedroom mirror years earlier, adjusting her dress for another family gathering filled with criticism and advice, had become someone who no longer needed external validation to feel confident about her choices. Sarah had learned that meaningful success required honoring her authentic self, rather than trying to meet other people's expectations, even when those people loved her and wanted her to be happy. The criticism had been painful but ultimately useful, serving as a catalyst for the self-discovery and determination that had led to genuine fulfillment.